Welcome back to the Exempt List on the Zero Blitz podcast feed. Today, we are talking about everything we learned from a pretty weird week 7. We're hitting the halfway point of the season. And to break everything down from the last week of football, we have Mike Golic Jr. from DraftKings and the GoJo and Golic podcast. Hello, everybody. Week 7 is in the books. We're going to talk about all of it, including things that made us laugh from this weekend. But first, I want to introduce the guest, Mike Golic Jr., former ESPN broadcaster, current DraftKings, do everything media man. Is that about right, Mike?
Yeah, we can go with that. It's a good summary because I feel like, especially in the internet age, you are just kind of like a jack of all trades at this point. You don't just get to be an analyst. Like, you're a bleep poster and a little bit of a host and a little bit of everything. So it works.
A bleep poster.
I didn't know if we could cuss on the podcast or not. Well, can I say poster?
You can, and you're going to make Stone's job a little bit harder, but I do that.
That's why I asked. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I do that every single week. As we start off this podcast, like we do every week, we're going to go with the funniest things from the NFL weekend. People who know me, people who listen to the podcast know that my Falcons fandom taints a lot of how I perceive the NFL and how I consume the NFL. So I have just been getting such a great kick out of all the misery that Sean Payton's had this year in Denver. It really just brings, it warms my soul. It tickles me. And the day after they beat the Packers, a kind of a wacky ending where, there was a play that kind of reminded people of the Seahawks-Packers replacement ref. Don't know if it's a touchdown, don't know if it's an interception, don't know if it's incomplete, but they still got across the finish line for their second win of the season against the Green Bay Packers. And Sean Payton said about it, that was a good win for us. And yet I'm driving home last night, heading to get sushi. I don't like sushi. And finding myself circling the parking lot. Why can't I be happy? Well, you're searching for that perfect game. I'm just that way. First of all, why are you getting sushi if you don't like sushi?
I wasn't sure if that was like a significant other thing, like if Sean's person is forcing him out to go get sushi or what, but the why can't I it's very rare that we get a coach willing to be existential in front of us. I feel like this is still media Sean Payton leaking out the way he did when he slandered Nathaniel Hackett before the season, letting us in a little bit too much, because the old Sean Payton I don't feel like was going to give us this.
No. I would say to Sean is, if you're at week 7 of this Broncos season, and obviously you guys haven't played anything close to a perfect game, not even remotely close. I mean, you gave up 70 points for the week. Maybe you just drop that goal for yourself and stop saying it out loud. Like, if we can just get a couple wins, stack some progress going into the next year, we're stuck with Russell Wilson regardless. Even if we get the first pick in the draft, he's still going to be on the roster next year. How about we'll drop from perfect to competent? I think that's a good goal for them. And they were competent on Sunday. I just don't get why a multimillionaire, is eating something that he doesn't want to eat. Like, what the hell, dude?
Well, especially now being out in Denver, like, I don't know what the Denver sushi scene is in general, but coming from being in New Orleans all those years and having the best of seafood right from the Gulf in there, that's got to be a pretty big drop off too in quality. So all those things put together, yeah, it's a reminder that football coaches are incapable of being rich the right way. They're all such gluttons for punishment. Like, even coming back to coach after what Sean Payton could have had in television for a life that is infinitely easier, these guys are truly addicted to the grind set in a way that most people are I can't comprehend. I just saw that article about Gwyneth Paltrow the other day saying that when she sells her company, you're never going to see her again. And while people are going to make jokes like, oh yeah, that's because you made all that money. Exactly. That's being rich the right way. If I was that rich, like Powerball rich, never see me again. I wouldn't do anything else. I'd be gone somewhere. So he doesn't know how to be rich the right way because he's a football coach.
Yeah, and I one thing that I think is so funny is if he hadn't coached again, right, he would have been kind of a very credible voice to his frustrations or, comments about Nathaniel Hackett's job that he did in Denver last year. Because at the time, he was Sean Payton of the New Orleans Saints. 20 years of some of the best offensive football that you will see in this era of football. And he just tarnished it by coming back and somehow being worse than Nate Hackett was last year. But it does make me happy. It does bring a little warmth to my heart, because he thought that this is going to be a situation where he could walk right in, and we got Russell Wilson. Allegedly, we have a defense, which was a fair assumption on his part based on what this defense did last year. And I will say they have improved some, but still, like when you're allowing kind of the first quarter of the season that they had, it's kind of tough to buy in that all of their problems have been fixed over the last few weeks. I get why he thought that this was a situation where he could come in and win, but it just hasn't materialized that way.
It is Tom Brady kind of ruining hypotheticals for everybody, because once Tom Brady, we had the hypothetical for years about who gets more credit for the Patriots dynasty, Bill or Tom, who would be able to survive on the other side. And Tom went and called his shot and made it down in Tampa. We don't get that very often. Like, the best part of sports are hypotheticals. Any locker room I've ever been in college, it was guys arguing about hypothetical matchups between their high school teams. After school, I still talk about hypothetical matchups from teams that I didn't play in college that we could have. And you never actually have to see them out, which is why you get to argue so strongly. Sean Payton had that, and he let it slip away by going out here and actually trying to put it on wax. So it's a reminder, never do anything. Eat at Arby's.
Correct. Speaking of never doing anything, Bijan Robinson had quite the eventful game on Sunday for the Atlanta Falcons. I believe he played 3 snaps. He carried the ball 1 time in crunch time, like when they really needed a first down. They ended up giving him the ball when they were driving to kick the game-winning field goal. But the reason why this has become such a story was because Bijan Robinson was not on the injury report going into the game on Sunday. I understand the frustration there. He's someone who people have a lot of action in on fantasy. I'm sure people have action on his gambling lines. He's obviously a big contributor for the Falcons offense. And it was a little strange when he doesn't show up for basically the first half of the game, and then we get the sideline halftime interview saying that Arthur Smith says that Bijan Robinson isn't feeling very well. And we don't really see him again until that final drive, when I think it was either 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2, and they were like, well, we got to have this to win the game. So, Bijan, I don't really care how you're feeling, but you're kind of maybe the best player on this offense, so you need to get in there. And then Bijan Robinson said yesterday that he was dealing with a headache of some sort. I think maybe the funniest part of Arthur Smith's war against fantasy players now, at what point did you find out that Bijan Robinson wasn't feeling well, Arthur? That's the part that really matters here, because you can't just have your star player not be in the game, not be a part of the game, but he's also warming up and not on the injury list. Mike, what did you make of this situation that was unfolding this weekend?
Yeah, bizarre. And as you mentioned, with the Kyle Pitts of this all and the backdrop of this and Arthur Smith's war against people's joy. I mean, forget even their fantasy or their betting slips, just their joy in watching what was supposed to be one of the most hyped offenses in the NFL this season because of all the positionless football and what Arthur Smith is as a play caller, what he did with Mariota last year, and to now see it yet again rob people of happiness in this spot shouldn't be overly surprising at this point. I do think the funniest part of this is that they won. Like, yes, in all of the conversation that we have, and I'm not trying to make this actually a thing, but in a world where we do the running back value thing all the time, the fact that people were already a little bit surprised Tyler Algier, who played well last year. The situation you had in that running back room last year wasn't bad by NFL standards and was good enough to go out here and get you a win in the division in a game where the best player on the offense did not play. So all of that is definitely funny and a little bit sad.
Did you watch this game? Like, how much of this game did you see?
Not a ton.
They should have won by like 3 damn scores, dude. I've seen the Falcons have a lot of calamity of errors. I've never seen them fumble as many times as they did in the red zone. So they had 2 fumbles on the 1-yard line. One where Drew Dahlman, like, he snapped the ball and honestly, it just didn't go far enough. And it kind of just fell right off the bottom of his ass and hit the ground, and Tampa Bay picked it up. Another one where
the worst.
It's pretty embarrassing, I gotta say, because it was 1st and goal from the 1-yard line, and
it's just tough as a center because every once in a while you feel that one. Like, there's some snap mistakes under center that you won't feel with the exchange, but when it's gun like that and it hits the bottom of your butt and then trickles back. Oh, it was under center.
Under center.
Okay, that's why he didn't feel it then. Yeah, that one's tough.
Yeah. And then there was another fumble on the 1-yard line where Desmond Ridder was wide open for like a little keeper. He's about to run into the end zone, and Antoine Winfield Jr. comes out of nowhere and punches the ball out of his hands, and you got the fumble touchback. And then they were on the 11-yard line right before halftime, and they got strip sacked with 11 seconds left before they could call a timeout and kick a field goal. So, look, it's like...
I want to know what the record of teams is in games where they're on the wrong side of a fumble touchback. Because that seems like one of those plays where as soon as I see it pop up, I just assume the offending team is destined to lose.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like they were destined to lose with everything that was going on. And normally it's a game that they do lose. So I was kind of surprised that they pulled it out. But it's just like, damn, dude, that was just the peak Falcons game where it's like, this is awful. But there's enough good things going on there to keep me intrigued and watching. Like, you got down to the 1 yard line twice. You were in the red zone consistently, but you fumbled the ball 3 damn times. Like, and I'll be back on Sunday too. Like, it's just,
the Falcons are a birdie on hole 17 in a round of golf where it doesn't matter how bad you've played the rest of the day. You get that one little glimmer of hope that keeps you coming back the next time.
Yeah. I don't know if there's going to be a punishment here. We'll see what the Falcons have to say. We'll see what the NFL finds out. But what do you think should be like an appropriate punishment for, the situation that they find out that it was a spot where the Falcons kind of hid how Bijan Robinson was feeling leading up to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's probably a pretty finable offense. I'm sure the NFL's got something like that codified at this point, just because this isn't like college football where we're drawing it up in the dirt, how you even begin to approach the subject of injuries during the week. And there's no set rubric for this. The NFL, it's pretty tried and true. Like, we talk about gambling becoming more popular now, but there's been all this stuff in place already. So I'd imagine it's going to be a pretty heavy fine, probably nothing beyond that, because like you said, a lot of this is going to be about proving what they knew and when, and how you go about doing that seems kind of difficult.
Rise up. Gotta beat the Titans 5-3 this weekend. Someone who has not had a whole lot of winning in his NFL career. The last funny thing from the weekend that we're going to get to. I'm glad that I get to do this from the safety of my apartment in Brooklyn, and from behind the screen where this person cannot reach me, because he is justifiably upset about where his team is, and that is Commanders defensive lineman Jonathan Allen. So after they lose to the hapless New York Giants yesterday, who were 1-5 going into that game, and they won 14-7 against the Commanders, Jonathan Allen, who has been a member of the Commanders since the 2017 NFL season. Well, actually, Stone, can you bring in the sound for us? I think we have the sound for this.
Frustrating when that.
Yes, it does. I'm tired of this. Tired of this. Been 7 years of the same. Tired of it.
What can you do now going forward to get it turned around?
Get our minds right and get ready to play Philadelphia.
Perfect.
There had to be a moment when he heard it come out of his mouth where he said, "Get ready to play Philadelphia," where he went, "Oh God, we have to play Philadelphia now with this as the backdrop."
Oh yeah. Yeah. Hey, at least they gave him a game earlier this season, but I don't know. It feels like you're kind of trending in an opposite direction since that has happened. So Jonathan Allen, he has seen a lot of losing since he was drafted by the Commanders in 2017. He was their first round pick. I think he was the first round pick that kind of led the run of them taking defensive linemen in the first round with Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne. He was kind of the first guy that they added to the mix. Since he has been drafted, the Commanders are 42, 62, and 1. Now, Mike, I would like you to take a guess at this. John Allen played at Alabama from 2013 to 2016, 4 seasons. How many games do you think that he won at the University of Alabama? He's won 42 since 2017 with the Commanders. 42, 62, and 1.
So he was a 4-year guy at Alabama, right? He wasn't 3 and out. So he was there 4 years. And so this is dipping into I think the beginning of the CFP era. So if they're going to win a national title in there, you're going to play 15 games. So I'm going to say at Alabama, he won 57 games.
Ooh, that was close. 51.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's
51-6.
Oh,
so
God.
In the seven seasons that he's been a professional football player, he still has not matched the win total from those 4 seasons at Alabama, which I can't even begin to imagine, like, the psychological damage of coming from a program like Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia or some, blue blood program like that. And you're so good that you have to go spend your career, at least the start of it, on some dog no-name NFL team that's not doing anything to try and push this thing forward. That has to be one of the most alienating feelings for a star football player to go through, especially when you're coming from a program that is that dominant and you're winning 51 of the 57 games that you played in college.
Well, and think about even from the institutional standpoint of this, because, yeah, obviously you're dominant on the field, but I've seen interviews with Jonathan Allen where he's talked about the overwhelming standard there. He was the one I heard in a podcast say, everybody thinks they want to go to Bama until you get to Bama and realize what is asked of you to go out there and produce those kind of results in the competition there. And that's because you've got a competent organization. Nick Saban has run that thing like the Death Star. And so everything's going to be done the right way in there. And then to get drafted by Dan Snyder's Washington Commanders team and to see all of the ineptitude in the building, I can't imagine it took Jonathan Allen long from being inside that building to recognize, we're probably not going to win a ton of football games here because I know what it looks like when it's right, and this is clearly not that.
They got a lot of problems right now. I think, hey, the good thing is the ownership situation's fixed for now. We'll see what happens as this group gets to imprint their ownership on the team. And
it's got to suck getting chirped by Magic Johnson on Twitter now regularly, though.
It does. Especially when it's obvious to, like, 7 points not good enough to win a football game. Thanks. Kind of knew that already.
You're saying you can't say anything because he's going to flash the smile and the rings at you and be rich as hell.
Speaking of things that the Commanders might need to take care of, have you been following the Sam Howell sack pace update?
I haven't seen the latest update, but I just remember watching that game, knowing in the background what he walked in with and being very worried for his safety.
Okay, so Sam Howell is now on pace for 97 sacks this year, which is an increase from last week when he was on pace for 96. He's already been sacked 40 times this year, right? So the record for most sacks in the season still belongs to David Carr back in 2002 with 76. So he's on pace to smash that. Like he's going to hit that before like maybe December 10th. Like maybe after Thanksgiving is when he hits the 76 mark. Mike, I want to ask you, as a former offensive lineman, how much blame does a quarterback get when you're on pace to get sacked like literally 100 times? It's not even an exaggeration.
Yeah, it's a fair amount. And thankfully, I think we've been better as a nation in pointing out that, sack percentage, a lot of these things that you can use to sort of show a quarterback's role in a lot of this. And Sam Howell's playing style, the guy plays like it's still the ACC, where he's trying to bounce off guys and constantly make this extra effort play. And so some of that always falls on the offensive line when it comes to protection. But Sam Howell, plays a big part in that with just his style and what he's trying to do outside of the structure of that offense. Like, he's trying to do the Patrick Mahomes stuff that Eric Bieniemy used to see in that offense without the Patrick Mahomes ability. And so these are the results you get when you don't have a quarterback that's as adept at working his way out of those situations when it's off script. If he survives this season, I want his body studied, because he's Wolverine if he makes it through amount of punishment and actually walks out on under his own power, which I hope for him. I obviously don't want to see him hurt, but no one should be able to take those kind of hits and keep going. And if he does, I'm convinced he's adamantium.
It's been 7 games and he's been sacked 40 times. Like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And I see this is the kind of stat that I love, because you can't put the asterisk of, we're playing 17 games now, so it's a little bit different. Can't do that here, because you want to cut a game off of this, then he's on pace for like 91 sacks for the season, which is still a big time NFL record. I just hope for Sam's health and his safety, like, throw the ball, dude. Just throw it. Just throw it.
It should be like a little bit of for who, for what at this point, because I understand, like, you're paid, like, you are trying to make something happen with this year. We did have some expectations for the Commanders coming into this season, but man, at some point, self-preservation is an incredible motivator. Like, that's what I've always said in a lot of these games where people talk about, like, what does a team have to play for at this point? Like, most of these guys are constantly fighting for their jobs, and Sam's going to be in that realm because of where he was drafted as a quarterback, but also just physical preservations. Once you step out there, there's a whole bunch of people trying to kick your ass on every play, and he's been getting his ass kicked a whole lot. So just get rid of it, man. Live to fight another day.
Yeah. So just for reference before we move on, last season, only 14 teams finished this season allowing more than 40 sacks. So like in a 7-game span, he's already gotten the season's worth of sacks, which I think is fairly frightening for him. And Sam, throw the ball, brother. All right, let's get to some things that we learned from a weird week in the NFL. I thought one of the strangest things this week, I mean, I'm not really surprised that the Ravens won because I think they're one of the best teams in the league, but to win 38-6 in the manner that they did, because I feel very comfortable, even after that game, still saying that Detroit Lions team is very talented, very good. I mean, the offensive line's good. The defense has been great this year. Jared Goff has been good this year. You know, Sam Laporta has been a godsend for them at tight end. But they got absolutely demolished on Sunday by the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, who was playing at, you know, it's one of the best games I've ever seen him play. And I think it kind of changed the landscape on what's possible for Baltimore and like what should be expected of Baltimore this year. Because now, to me, they look like either the best team or the second best team in the AFC as things stand right now, but between them and the Chiefs. So, Mike, what was your take on just what happened with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson on Sunday?
Well, that kind of coincides with the thing that I was going to go with I learned, which is I think the Chiefs are the best team in football already at this point. And I think most of that is based on because we've gone through this cycle now in recent weeks, and the Ravens are going to be next up, right? They're going to be the team of the week. And we've seen the team of the week lose the following week, each of like the last 4 weeks, starting off with the Dolphins losing to the Bills. So then the Bills lose right after that. It was the Lions' turn this last week, and they got dropped like a bad habit. And so now it's going to be, can the Ravens do this again? And I think they were already in the group of teams that I was like, okay, they can win a Super Bowl, but we're working through Todd Monken's integration of the stuff that he liked from the old offense in with the new stuff. You're obviously trying to do some different things with a weapon, especially in Zay Flowers, who's a different receiver than Baltimore's had in a while. They seem to have finally gotten that thing off their back when it's come to drafting receivers that we heard Eric DeCosta talk about their issues in the draft at that position. That's a big hit. And so his integration into this offense in that way and just their protection. Like I thought that was the biggest difference in this game. And the reason I'm still a little worried going forward is most of the Ravens' issues in the second half of seasons have been tied to just overwhelming injury that even Lamar Jackson can't out excellent. But seeing Ronnie Stanley out there healthy, playing 2019 ball along that offensive line that looked really good overall gave me a lot of hope that, hey, if they can keep that unit in particular healthy this season, the Ravens have a really good chance of being an AFC championship at least caliber team.
Yeah, and just the way the defense is playing right now is amazing. Roquan Smith been an absolute monster since they traded for him last year, and I'm just like, man, you know, I guess the Bears were concerned about Roquan Smith not fitting Matt Eberflus' defense, but I kind of watch him play. I'm like, what the hell kind of defense couldn't use someone like this? Like,
yeah, that's the ultimate. Like, there are certain players and even certain coaches where you know their pedigree going in to the point where you're like, all right, if you can't make it work with so-and-so, that's a you problem. If you can't make it work with Roquan, that's a you problem because that guy's incredible.
Yeah. So I think it's cool, like just the development that we've seen from them on defense. And I think weirdly in a way, all the injuries that they had last year have kind of helped prepare them for this year because so many guys got playing time. And were able to kind of develop some skills. And even remember, like by the end of the year, even when they were hurt, when they get to that wild card game against Cincinnati, they kind of kicked Cincinnati's offense right in the teeth. And you're it was a 98-yard fumble return away from potentially upsetting the Bengals on the road at home. So now that you have Lamar Jackson, you have this offense with Todd Monken, and they're kind of starting to hit the sweet spot of what is working for them within this offense. I'm just excited for Lamar because when he has the infrastructure to be great, it's the best thing in sports in the league right now to me. It's the most exciting thing in the league right now to me. So I really hope that this continues. I want to get back to your point on the Chiefs being the best team in the NFL because I think I agree with you because I'm kind of down between the Chiefs and the Ravens. I would give it to the Chiefs right now just because they got 15. They got 15 on this.
I was going to say, they're not going to embarrass you in front of company is the way I put it with them. I can trust them.
Right. But I think what's interesting about this year is it's kind of a different style than maybe even a little bit last year. I think it's closer to last year than obviously the years with Tyreek Hill and when they had, all the fastest guys in the world. But the defense this year is really spectacular to me. And I like the way that Steve Spagnuolo has kind of put this thing together. Those guys in the secondary who were really young last year have kind of grown up again and are playing good ball. What kind of sets what kind of sets the Chiefs apart from the rest of the NFL, just as, their status as a top team is concerned?
I think it is the fact that we've seen them do this version of it. Like you mentioned, the way the offense looks, it is very similar to last year. They've already had to make a lot of their big adjustments as a team from the offensive line 2 years ago where they reset and now probably have. I mean, you could argue one of the best interior threes, especially in the NFL. The tackle situation, we know Jawan Taylor's kind of been the focus of everyone from the outside because of all the snap timing stuff. But like in general, that's a group up front that you can trust. And Mahomes made the adjustment of the way teams were going to play them to take away big plays. They've leaned even more to the Travis Kelce of it all. Rashee Rice seems like he's coming along and starting to be a guy outside, kind of the way Juju was last year for them, where you need one ancillary playmaker that Mahomes trusts enough outside of the 87 portion of the offense. And it feels like Rice is starting to fall into that category. And then defensively, we all did the thing after week one where we looked up when Chris Jones was watching that game from the stands and went, man, Spags was able to put together that game plan that went out there and put Ben Johnson's offense in its place a little bit to open up the season. But, they still managed to go out there and win that game. But it didn't feel like the defense's fault necessarily in that one. That was more a product of what, Kelce was missing on the other side. But then after that, as he's come back in here, we've gotten the final form of Chris Jones so far, where we had that obsession a few years ago where they were playing him on the edge and people were wondering why. We've had him mixed up a bunch between inside and outside, and it's worked really well for them so far in this season. So I just think they did the great job in overhauling the roster in all the ways they needed to around Mahomes once that financially became part of the equation. And they've gotten a lot of hits on those guys. And now they're comfortable in their second year of kind of having to do it in this way. And I think it showed already. Like, they don't care about, I heard Dominique Foxworth said this on his show the other day. They don't care about being the best team right now. Like, this isn't even their goal. They're trying to truly peak in December and January football. But I think just by nature of the comfort they've got in their identity and having Patrick Mahomes, they're already there.
I keep telling people this. I feel like I see people each week. I'm starting to get a little tired of this Patrick Mahomes thing. Don't do that to yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't do that to yourself. We got at least like 13 more years of this, dude. At least. So I just think it's interesting that, sometimes you have these teams where they'll get into the one-score games and, they lose those. So those become coin flips. But for this team, it's not a coin flip. And they can still do what they did on Sunday. And where Patrick Mahomes goes supernova and no one can keep it close at all.
That is a great point, especially in light of what we saw with the 49ers the other night. You heard the frustration from Fred Warner after the game. It was like, we got to find a way to win the grimy ones. The Chiefs can win every which way right now, and it might not be as physically overwhelming as the Niners when we talk about that, but they're comfortable in those situations, so that goes a long way.
Yeah. Let's move on to another AFC contender who kind of got bludgeoned on Sunday. The Miami Dolphins lost to the Philadelphia Eagles by a score of 31-17. The Dolphins offense only scored one touchdown. The other touchdown came from a pick six from Jerome Baker. They were held to 21 yards in their first 15 plays. The first play of the game was a delay of game. Straight up, they just got punched in the mouth, I think is the best way to put it. From your point of view, Mike, do you think the Dolphins were exposed on Sunday Night Football?
No, I mean, I think what we got reminded of on Sunday Night Football is that at the heart of everything, and this is just me spreading propaganda, obviously, for fat people, but you can't do anything without the offensive line being in the right space. And even earlier this year when Teron Armstead went down, which unfortunately has become a stanza that they're familiar with down there and some of the injuries that he's dealt with, being down three starters on that line, having Lester Cotton shuffled in there during this game, you saw against a team as physically capable and who also got healthy at the right time, right? Jalen Carter coming back after missing the game for Philadelphia. I don't think saying there's a blueprint implies that everybody's got the ability to replicate this. But what we saw against Buffalo was your front four's got to be able to handle things for you so you can allocate the resources necessary to Tyreek, to Waddle, to all those guys that hurt you on the back end and disrupt the timing for Tua. And for Philadelphia, it was the same way where those guys were living in their backfield because you had three backups in and guys moved around in the offensive line, and you've got incredible players that were able to overcome the fact that Philly was missing 3 dudes in the secondary. So I think it was just a reminder that the Dolphins offense is still awesome. Tua is still a really good player, but when you don't have the guys up front, that they don't have to be dominant, but can't go out there and execute at the level that they need to in that offense, the whole house of cards kind of can crumble with that.
Yeah, and I will say for the Dolphins part, and I'm with you. I don't know if they got exposed. I don't really think they got exposed. I'll just say there might not be a worse defensive line you can face when you're down like multiple starters up front. Because Jalen Carter, he stepped in and has become an elite player already. Fletcher Cox is still playing at a really high level. Even Milton Williams, their third defensive tackle, is a monster. They got Hassan Reddick.
We had
Josh
a Nolan
Sweat.
Smith sighting in this game. We've been
Nolan
waiting
Smith
for that
sighting
all season. The Georgia Bulldogs just decided to eat.
That's right, go Dogs. They're just so deep up front. And I thought one thing that was interesting after the game, I was covering this game. I wrote a column on basically what happened. And after the game, Tua and Mike McDaniel, they both kind of alluded to the fact that when you have this many changing pieces up front on the offensive line, it's not just a performance, but it's also just like the down-to-down communication, the organization, because not everyone's on the same page. Like if you have a guy, because even because it came into the game without Teron Armstead and Connor Williams, so your center and your left tackle are out. They lost Isaiah Wynn during the game. So now you're really dealing with a patchwork group up front. And Tua was saying, that maybe he can be better with the communication, just making sure that everyone knows what to do and what's going on, because they, for the first time this year, they kind of were moving slow out of the huddle. Like I said, they got delay of game on the first play of the game. There's a bunch of other plays where they're getting the playoff right before the clock's about to go off. So I thought it was interesting for them to talk about, we kind of got to do a little better job on the organizational process, because offensive line injuries is something that you're just going to have to deal with, unfortunately. And I think we saw even an offense as flashy and shiny as the Dolphins, you still need your big guys to play well up front.
No doubt. And I think, too, it's a good reminder this year where we're talking so much about defense that there is not a ton of offensive line depth around football. You mentioned the depth of the Eagles defensively. That's kind of been reflected around the league. There's a lot of really incredibly talented, especially edge players that teams have stockpiled and can just roll through on these best defenses, and that is not reflected in their counterparts on offense. It's been really difficult for all the holistic reasons we could spend a whole other podcast talking about, but the Dolphins are a prime example of that.
All right, I wanted to talk about the Steelers real quick, because I just don't understand how Mike Tomlin keeps doing this. Okay, so I went to, when I was in Philly this weekend, I was hanging out with some of my buddies from college, and one of my best friends from college, he's a huge Steelers fan. And, he's asking me, like, what I think about the team. I was like, dude, like, they suck. He's like, okay, but, like, they're winning, though. It's like, I know, and I don't know what I'm supposed to say to that, because I still don't think this team is very good. They're 4-2. They're 23rd in point differential. They've been outscored by 24 points this year. Is this a cult? Straight up. Like, is this a cult, like what Mike Tomlin and the Steelers are running down there? Because it feels like magic how they're winning every week. Like, even the Ravens game a couple weeks ago, I thought that was one of the best games Lamar Jackson's ever had throwing the ball. And they just dropped, like, every single pass en route to a win where you're just squeezing it out at the end. Is this magic? Is this a cult? Like, what is happening in Pittsburgh?
It's 2023, man. Defense can win you the day. I mean, hell, we just saw the Browns go out there in a game where they had to go to PJ Walker midstream, managed to pull things off in a shootout with Gardner Minshew. It just seems like that kind of year. I think the Steelers defense, who had a couple of embarrassing stinkers early in the season, is still a really top-notch unit. When you've got a game wrecker like TJ Watt, that certainly changes the math on a lot of these things. And then offensively, I think the reason that we're all so focused on the Matt Canada of it all is there are some compelling players there. Like George Pickens, he really has one thing right now in throwing back shoulder balls to him, but man, he does that thing incredibly well. And now that you've got Deontay Johnson back in that group, who is your true number one in that receiver core, we saw that start to unlock some different places of the field. Jalen Warren's been a really nice compliment to Najee Harris in that backfield. And so I think there's been good enough players, and Kenny Pickett's a good enough quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's never going to be an all-pro or a Pro Bowler in this league, I don't think. But he's been able to make enough timely plays because the defense sets the floor in a certain place, and they're able to make it happen. And yes, maybe Mike Tomlin is some portion along the way made a sacrifice to some deity that allows them to do this every time.
Yes. So just for I think a quick stat that kind of illustrates what's happening here. The Steelers on offense are 26th in yards per play, 4.7 yards per play. On defense, are 25th in yards per play. They're 4-2. I do think, like, just for a real football take, it does kind of show the value of just having game breakers. Like, even if your whole team is not all the way there yet, just having someone like in the Ravens game, going back to that one, when they needed to close the game out, there's TJ Watt making every play you need to make. When they need a big play on offense, it kind of feels like over the past few weeks, George Pickens been able to make that play. So, look, I say this to say I was dubious coming into the year. I was like, dude, this has to be the year where Mike Tomlin doesn't walk out of the season with a winning record. But I just won't doubt the man anymore. There's no reason for me to do that. He's the GOAT, and he's doing some sort of magic. Last one before we get to some of you guys' voicemails that you guys brought in. It's time to talk about Deshaun Watson, I think, and what's happening there with the Browns. Because I feel like we can officially, just as far as on the field stuff is concerned, we can officially designate this a terrible, terrible, terrible trade. And that's, if you can just live in a fantasy world where all the other stuff doesn't matter, we're just talking about 3 first-round picks, $230 million contract for Deshaun Watson, your return on investment there has been borderline pathetic, dude. Like, you have got absolutely nothing out of this Watson trade, to the point where I'm not even sure what you can do here, because you kind of just have to sit here and ride it out. He had 2 terrible interceptions before he was knocked out of the game on Sunday. PJ Walker comes in, they somehow score 39 points and end up winning the game. But at some point, Watson has to be a guy that can make a play, be the guy that you paid $230 million for. It's baffling to me that he's been this bad.
Yeah, and that's going back to last year. Like, this isn't a fully representative sample size yet, but damn, it feels like enough to already say, I don't know if you ever get that guy back, especially now because injuries factored into this. Like, dealing with a rotator cuff injury for a quarterback, I don't see that getting better in the body of this year, certainly. And then you had the offseason last year to maybe reset, where he had gone so long without playing football that you get back to it mid-flow of last season, and then you go through a full offseason, but none of that's borne any fruit. And so why at this point in this juncture in his NFL career, where, remember too, the Browns offensively, Kevin Stefanski, they made every concession to try and make this offense look more like the version of it that Deshaun Watson ran in Houston, and to meet him halfway as opposed to jamming square peg and round hole for a lot of Kevin Stefanski's usual stuff, to the point where we were looking around before the Chubb injury going, you're kind of subverting your own team's best ability by putting the ball in the hands of Watson more than you put it in the hands of your actual best offensive player in Nick Chubb. And so they've done everything on their end to try and make this hospitable for him, and it's just not working. It is an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, complete disaster. So just to look at some rate stats from where he was at Houston to Cleveland, completion percentage has dropped from 67.8% to 59.6%. Touchdown percentage has dropped from 5.9% to 4%. Interception percentage has jumped from 2.1% to 2.9%. Yards per attempt dropped from 8.3 to 6.4. Yards per completion dropped from 12.3 to 10.8. Yards per game dropped from 269 to 178. I mean, this is production you can find anywhere. Like, you could go find some guy in the 4th round of the draft to come do some, like, to throw interceptions and get sacked a bunch and not move the ball. You're paying $230 million for this. Like, this is, I find, especially once you start factoring in all the off-field stuff where he has embarrassed himself and the organization, and they've embarrassed themselves too along the way. This has to be like the worst trade in NFL history. I don't even know if there's any, like, even a close second at this point.
No,
so,
I think especially because of the off-field stuff, because Browns fans were plugging their nose and just looking the other direction because they believed they were going to get one of the generational quarterbacks. And now that that's not there, I do wonder what shelf life this has and how ugly this is going to get for Cleveland, because I get financially, there's really nothing you can do. You're so hamstrung by this, but I'd imagine it could get pretty hairy around there. And I think this is all exasperated by the fact that you've got a Super Bowl caliber defense. Like, you might have the best defense in the NFL right now. You've got one of the best, a generational talent in Myles Garrett on the other side. You've got so many of the other things in that roster that are Super Bowl ready. And the one thing that you thought, given that investment, was going to be a given is now the one that's completely the bed here.
Yeah. We're going to talk about one more team before we get to some voicemails. Is it time for Buffalo Bills fans to start panicking?
This was one of the points I had written down as far as what we learned this weekend is Buffalo's got a really important offseason coming up, I think. Like, I'm already kind of looking ahead to this because in this form, the Buffalo Bills, because of Josh Allen, are still capable of making a run, but the roster is just so beat up. And we knew coming into this year, this is a roster that was getting old in so many of the important parts defensively. On offense, outside of Stephon Diggs, you don't have a real number 2 receiver that you can point to. And so all of that means they're getting ready to have to make the switch that we've already seen the Chiefs make and the Bengals make inside the AFC in terms of hockey line changing some personnel in there, improving offensive lines, getting younger in these secondaries around the quarterbacks that you paid all this money to. We got to see proof that Buffalo can go out there and hit this out of the park the way so far Kansas City has, results still pending based on the early regular season slow starts for the Bengals. But that's immediately where my mind jumped to is whatever happens this year, they're going to be MacGyvering this thing. To me, it's really about, because you've got one of the anointed ones at quarterback, what are you going to do this offseason? This is a huge put up or shut up moment for that franchise.
Yeah, and I do think that some of the panic should be lessened by, or maybe it should be increased. I don't know, because, you have all these injuries on the defensive side of the ball, which is crazy. Because, I think a defense, you can survive maybe a Trey White going out for the season.
Sure.
Maybe you could survive a Matt Milano going out for the season. Maybe you could survive a Daquan Jones going out for the season. But you probably can't survive all 3 going out for the season. And then you walk into the game against the Patriots. Oh, you also don't have Ed Oliver, who has really, really stepped up his game this year. And I think he's actually really starting to play like the player they thought they were getting when they drafted him out of Houston a few years ago. It's just, I kind of chalk up the Bills to this. Sometimes you just ain't your year. And I feel like that's where they are right now. All right, let's get to some voicemails before we get out of here real quick. Stone, can you play what these crazy people have sent us today?
Hey, Charles. This is Humphrey from Michigan. Been rocking with you since Setting the Edge days. My question is, after that 38-6 beatdown by the Ravens, how worried should Lions fans be about the team and potential outlook for this season, what the expectations should be? Thank you.
How worried should you be? I mean, a little worried because you lost 38-6, but also, I don't really know if that's really indicative of what this Lions team is this year. Sometimes even good teams, they just have a day where they don't show up and they get trounced by a team that's even a little bit better than they are. But, once you get David Montgomery back, I think that's going to help the offense out. The defense is normally good. They had a pretty bad day on Sunday, but I don't know if it's time to just, start freaking out and wanting to tear it down just yet.
Yep, I would agree. One game is not a sample size to panic. I was a little stunned at just how one-sided it seemed to be Ravens pass rush against what is a very good personnel-wise Detroit Lions offensive line. Even Penei Sewell, multiple holding calls in that game against the Ravens defense. We've talked about having a go-to weapon as far as especially a game-breaking pass rusher, but the Ravens kind of get you from all over the place, which is in its own way very difficult with the scheme that they run and how many different guys they give shots at the quarterback.
Yeah, so don't panic just yet. If you get blown out again next week, then yeah, I would say it's time to start panicking. Next one, please.
Hey, I'm the same Ravens fan who called the other day. Remember when all these teams and the Lions and Dan Campbell said, and the Falcons especially, said, nah, we're good. We don't want Lamar Jackson. The Falcons said, we'd rather have the nasty man and sell our soul to the devil. I don't think Lamar's forgotten that. During the schedule release, the Cardinals posted a picture that said running back talking about the Ravens. I think Lamar's going to torch them, and my voice is gone because I was at the game and screaming at every first down. Also, I know it's kind of unsustainable with the chunks, but I love this team. Football makes me, I don't know.
Yeah, agreed.
It
You
sounds
sound
like
terrible,
a little Sean
dude.
Payton at the end there.
Yeah.
Why can't I be happy?
Going through an existential and physical crisis there, but congrats on the Ravens. I mean, look, I wanted Lamar Jackson more than I wanted air to breathe when that seemed like a possibility this summer. And I think he's shown why people, or not people, fan bases were clamoring for their teams to at least inquire if it would be possible to get Lamar Jackson from the Ravens. And just with how he's played this season, you're right. The fact that teams were like literally tripping over themselves to say, no, we are not interested in this guy. You look a little dumb now. So,
yeah, there's really no excuse there. Like, I understand some people claim to be worried about upsetting the current people inside their organizations. But I mean, God, especially for the Falcons, you basically sawed off the goodwill with Matt Ryan over Deshaun Watson on a whim not too long ago. So you're not above that. And you wouldn't do it for this guy is wild to me.
Right. And who knows, like by the time like you started working out a trade with the Ravens, maybe you could have had him for the same compensation that you were going to trade for Deshaun Watson anyway. So I agree. It's dumb, but I'm also glad that Ravens fans get to experience that because I think he's a great fit for that team and that fan base. And I think we have one more voicemail before we call it a wrap on this episode.
I don't think Arthur Smith is actually a head coach. I think he is a secret performance artist because of the way he runs the Falcons offense. He's picked the most comical turnover-worthy prone quarterback. And intentionally, I think at this point, uses worse versions of the players his team drafts in the top 10 just to see if he can get away with it. And eventually it will screw him over. But not yet.
Yeah, I mean...
A lot of false summits in that voicemail, by the way. I was like...
the performance art stuff, I feel like that's kind of dead on after what happened on Sunday with Bijan, and the fact that every time there's a game where Drake London or Kyle Pitts or Bijan doesn't get the burn that you would expect, it becomes a little fancy football quip by Arthur. So I think that there is some credence to the performance art stuff. I'm annoyed by this team because, the guy brought up the most turnover-worthy prone quarterback in the NFL with Desmond Ridder, which is objectively true at this point. But the frustrating part is like he can still move the ball and get you close to the end zone, and then you don't score. So performance art, that's just what the Falcons are. Like they're sad little Shakespearean tragedy over there. But I just want them to start scoring touchdowns again. That's literally all I want.
I wonder how much of this perception of Arthur Smith is tied back to the facial hair choice. Like it does seem like the mustache for him has just become something where maybe people can't take him seriously with that.
It's not a good look. I will say that every single game this season, I've had someone text me, "Yo, what is on his face?" I'm like, I know.
That graphic or that shot of him that went viral in the Commanders game where he was hands up on his head making that face, just watching that back now because I was searching his name on Twitter to try and just get like a fresh mustache shot in there. It's very it makes him look like Ted Lasso. I think that's what does it. And so maybe there's something in that really makes it feel like performance art then.
Yeah. Arthur's not as kind as Ted is, though, at least to the media.
That is true.
Quite.
That is true.
Not quite.
I do say this all from a place of jealousy because I can't grow a very good mustache. Like if I don't have the connectors and the rest of the beard here, this starts to look real odd.
I'm the same way. Like if I shave this, I got to shave the mustache too. It's just it's not good enough. So I think that's all the voicemails we have, and we're going to close out this episode of the Exempt List right here. Mike, before we get you out of here, let the people know what you're working on and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. At GoJo and Golic on every social media. That is the podcast. It is also live on DraftKings YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday with me and Dad. Jesse Cofield is our great anchor out at DraftKings Studio in Boston. So we're doing it 5 days a week. It's been a good time. My mom wasn't ready for Dad to be home all the time yet, so he gets to hang out with me for 2 hours a day for some supervised fun.
That's good. Well, who's supervising who?
That's a great question. We still haven't fully figured that out. So tune in. We'll figure that out along the way.
All right. So it's going to be the end of this episode of the Exempt List. As you did this week, please send us a voicemail. You can send that in at speakpipe.com/0blitz. Ask a question, send a hot take, just ramble like a couple of you guys did today, or just don't say anything. Just let yourself be heard, and we will do with it what needs to be done. We'll be back with another episode next Tuesday, like we are every Tuesday. Tune in tomorrow for an episode of Inside Coverage with Jason Fitz, Charles Robinson, Jory Epstein. I'm Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts. You can find Mike on Twitter at Mike Golic Jr. You can find our producer, Stone Rochelle, on Twitter at SJ Rochelle. And we will see you next week.